I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. According to Wikipedia, quote, during November 1876, a wealthy Englishman named John Tunstall arrived in Lincoln County, New Mexico, where he intended to develop a cattle ranch, store, and bank in partnership with young attorney Alexander McSween and cattleman John Chisholm. At the time, Lincoln County was dominated both economically and politically by Lawrence Murphy and James Dolan, the proprietors of L.G. Murphy and Company, later James J. Dolan and Company, the only store in the county. The factions were divided along ethnic and sectarian lines, with the Murphy faction being mostly Irish Catholic, while Tunstall and his allies were mostly English Protestant. L.G. Murphy and Company lent thousands of dollars to the territorial governor, and the territorial attorney general eventually held the mortgage on the company. Tunstall learned that Murphy and Dolan, who bought many of their cattle from rustlers, had lucrative beef contracts from the United States government to supply forts and Indian agencies. The government contracts, along with their monopoly on merchandise and financing for farms and ranches, allowed Murphy, Dolan, and their partner Riley to become wealthy. The main event that resulted in the beginning of the Lincoln County War was controversy over the disbursement of Emil Fritz's insurance policy. Emil Fritz was a partner of L.G. Murphy. When he died in 1874, the executors of the estate hired Alexander McSween to collect his insurance policy. After collecting the policy, McSween refused to give the money to the executor of the estate because the house claimed that the money was owed to them as a debt, and McSween suspected that the executor of the estate would give the money to them. McSween also knew how badly needy for cash the house was, and as a business competitor was likely loath to have the money go to them, whether their claim was legitimate or not. During February 1878, in a court case that was eventually dismissed, they obtained a court order to seize all of McSween's assets, but mistakenly included all of Tunstall's assets with those of McSween. Sheriff Brady formed a posse to attach Tunstall's remaining assets at the ranch, 70 miles from Lincoln. Dolan also enlisted the John Kinney Gang, Seven Rivers Warriors, and the Jesse Evans Gang, and their job was mainly to harass and rustle cattle from Tunstall's and Chisholm's ranches, as well as being the faction's hired gunmen. On February 18, 1878, members of the sheriff's posse caught up to Tunstall while he and his ranch hands, Richard Dick Brewer, Billy the Kid, John Middleton, Henry Newton Brown, Robert A. Weidenman, and Fred Waite, were herding his last 9 horses back to Lincoln. Frank Warner Angel, a special investigator for the Secretary of the Interior, later determined that Tunstall was shot in, quote, cold blood by Jesse Evans, William Morton, and Tom Hill. Tunstall's murder was witnessed from a distance by several of his men, including Richard Brewer and Billy the Kid. Tunstall's murder began the Lincoln County War. Tunstall's cowhands and other local citizens formed a group known as the Regulators to avenge his murder, since the territorial criminal justice system was controlled by allies of Murphy and Dolan. While the Regulators at various times consisted of dozens of American and Mexican cowboys, the main dozen or so members were known as the, quote, ironclad, including McCarty, Richard Dick Brewer, Frank McNabb, Doc Scurlock, Jim French, John Middleton, George Coe, Frank Coe, Jose Chavez y Chavez, Charlie Bowdry, Tom Folliard, Frank Waite, a Chickasaw, and Henry Newton Brown. The Regulators set out to apprehend the sheriff's posse members who had murdered Tunstall. After the Regulators were deputized by the Lincoln County Justice of the Peace, together with Constable Martinez, they attempted to serve the legally issued warrants to Tunstall's murderers. Sheriff Brady arrested and jailed Martinez and his deputies in defiance of their deputized status. They gained release and searched for Tunstall's murderers. They found Buck Morton, Dick Lloyd, and Frank Baker near the Rio Peñasco. Morton surrendered after a 5-mile running gunfight on the condition that he and his fellow deputy sheriff Frank Baker, who had no part in the Tunstall murder but was riding with Morton and Lloyd, would be returned alive to Lincoln. The Regulators' Captain Dick Brewer assured them that they would be taken back to Lincoln. but other regulators insisted on killing the prisoners. One regulator, William McCloskey, who was a friend of Morton's, resisted such action. On March 9, 1878, the third day of the journey back to Lincoln, the regulators killed McCloskey, Morton, and Baker in the Captain foothills along the Blackwater Creek. They claimed that Morton murdered McCloskey and tried to escape with Baker, forcing them to kill the two prisoners. Few believed the story, as they thought it was unlikely that Morton would have killed his only friend in the group, as the bodies of Morton and Baker each bore 11 bullet holes, one for each regulator. Utley believes that the regulators murdered them and killed McCloskey for opposing them. Nolan writes that Morton took 10 bullets, and Baker was shot 5 times. That same day, Tunstall's other two killers, Tom Hill and Jesse Evans, were shot while trying to rob a sheep drover near Tularosa, New Mexico. Hill died and Evans was severely wounded. While Evans was at Fort Stanton for medical treatment, he was arrested on an old federal warrant for stealing stock from an Indian reservation. Sheriff Brady asked for assistance from the Territorial Attorney General, Thomas Benton Catron, to end this, quote, anarchy. Catron referred the topic to the Territorial Governor Samuel B. Axtell. The governor decreed that John Wilson, the Justice of the Peace, had been appointed illegally by the Lincoln County Commissioners. Wilson had deputized the regulators and issued the warrants for Tunstall's murderers. Axtell's decree meant that the regulators' actions, formerly considered legal, were now illegal. Axtell was also able to revoke Weideman's status as Deputy U.S. Marshal, making Sheriff Brady and his men the only law officers of Lincoln County. On April 1, 1878, the regulators French, McNabb, Middleton, Waite, Brown, and McCarty made ready in the corral behind the Tunstall store before attacking Brady and his deputies on the main street of Lincoln. Brady died of at least a dozen gunshot wounds. Deputy George W. Hindman was also wounded fatally. McCarty and French broke cover and dashed to Brady's body, possibly to get his arrest warrant for McSween or to recover McCarty's rifle, which Brady had kept from a prior arrest. A surviving deputy, Billy Matthews, wounded both men with one bullet that passed through both of them. French's wound was so severe that he had to be temporarily harbored by Sam Corbett in a crawl space in Corbett's house. Weideman was also in the corral, but whether he participated was never ascertained. He claimed he was feeding Tunstall's dog. 3 days after the murders of Brady and Hindman, the regulators headed southwest from the area around Lincoln, reaching Blazer's Mill, a sawmill and trading post that supplied beef to the Mescalero Apaches. They came upon the rancher Buckshot Roberts, listed on their arrest warrant as one of Tunstall's murderers. In the ensuing shootout, the regulators mortally wounded Roberts, but he killed Brewer and wounded Middleton, Scurlock, Coe, and McCarty. After Brewer's death, the regulators elected McNabb as their captain. On April 29, 1878, Sheriff Pepin was directing a posse that included the Jesse Evans gang and the Seven Rivers Warriors. They engaged in a shootout with the regulators, McNabb, Saunders, and Frank Coe at the Fritz Ranch. McNabb died in the gunfire. Saunders was badly wounded, and Frank Coe was captured. The next day, the Seven Rivers members, Tom Green, Charles Marshall, Jim Patterson, and John Galvin, were killed in Lincoln, and although the regulators were blamed, this was never proven. Frank Coe escaped custody sometime after his capture, allegedly with the assistance of Deputy Sheriff Wallace Ollinger, who gave him a pistol. The day after McNabb's death, the regulators known as the Ironclad assumed defensive positions in the town of Lincoln, trading shots with Dolan men and allegedly members of the U.S. Army Cavalry. Quote, Dutch Charlie Kruling, a Dolan man, was wounded by rifle fire by George Coe. By allegedly shooting at government troops, the regulators gained a new set of enemies. On May 15th, the regulators tracked down and captured the Jesse Evans gang member, Manuel Segovia, who was believed to have shot McNabb. They shot him during an alleged escape. Around the time of Segovia's death, the regulator Ironclad gained a new member, a young Texas cowboy named Tom Folliard, who soon became McCarty's best friend. A large confrontation between the two forces occurred on the afternoon of July 15, 1878, when the regulators were surrounded in Lincoln in two different positions, the McSween house and the Ellis store. Opposing them were the Dolan Murphy Seven Rivers Cowboys. In the Ellis store were Scurlock, Bowdry, Middleton, Frank Coe, and several others. About 20 Mexican regulators, commanded by Josefita Chavez, were also positioned around town. In the McSween house were Alex McSween and his wife Susan, Billy the Kid, Henry Brown, Jim French, Tom Folliard, Jose Chavez y Chavez, George Coe, and a dozen Mexican vaqueros. During the next 3 days, the men exchanged shots and shouts. Tom Cullens, one of the McSween house defenders, was killed by a stray bullet. Around this time, Henry Brown, George Coe, and Joe Smith left the McSween house and went to the Tunstall store, where they chased 2 Dolan men into an outhouse with rifle fire and forced them to dive into the bottom to escape. The impasse continued until the arrival of U.S. Army troops commanded by Colonel Nathan Dudley. When these troops pointed cannons at the Ellis store and other positions, Billy the Kid, Doc Scurlock, and his men fled from their positions, as did Chavez's cowboys, leaving those remaining in the McSween house to their fate. On the afternoon of July 19th, the Murphy-Dolan faction set the house afire. As the flames spread and night began, Susan McSween and the other women and 5 children were granted safe passage out of the house, while the men inside continued to fight the fire. By 9 p.m., those left inside got set to flee out the back door of the burning house. Billy the Kid and Jim French assessed their situation and figured out a way to escape by using pistol fire as cover and escaping. Jim French went out first, followed by Billy the Kid, Folliard, and Jose Chavez y Chavez. The Dolan men saw them running and began shooting, killing Harvey Morris, McSween's law partner. Some troopers moved into the backyard to take those left into custody when a close-quarters gunfight erupted. Alexander McSween and the Seven Rivers cowboy Bob Beckwith both died. 3 other Mexican regulators got away in the confusion to rendezvous with the Ironclad members yards away. The Lincoln County War accomplished little other than to foster distrust and animosity in the area. The surviving regulators, most notably Billy the Kid, continued as fugitives. Gradually, his fellow gunmen scattered to their various fates. Billy rode with Bowdry, Folliard, Dave Rudabaugh, and a few other friends, with whom he rustled cattle and committed other crimes. Eventually, Sheriff Pat Garrett and his posse tracked and killed Folliard, Bowdry, and in July 1881, the Kid. The 3 men were buried at Fort Sumner, New Mexico. The Posse Comitatus Act, signed into law June 18, 1878, would have prevented the use of federal troops for domestic law enforcement, but President Hayes invoked the Insurrection Act of 1807 on October 7th. Murphy died of cancer on October 20, 1878, about the age of 47. Susan McSween hired attorney Houston Chapman to pursue charges against Dolan and others, in addition to working for amnesty for the Regulators. On February 18, 1879, 1 year to the day after Tunstall was murdered, Evans and Billy Campbell killed Chapman, then fled the territory. That murder was also attributed to Dolan, though his involvement was never proven. Dolan was indicted for the murder of Tunstall but was acquitted. He later acquired all of Tunstall's property before dying on his ranch in 1898, aged 49. Susan McSween took over a large sum of land in the 3 years after the Lincoln County War ended, establishing a ranch in 3 Rivers, New Mexico. By the mid-1890s, her ranch holdings were some of the largest in the territory. She averaged during this time between 3,000 and 5,000 head of cattle. She died a wealthy woman on July 3, 1931, aged 85.
Out, cause I'm here now and I'm staying. Claws out, this the fight that I've been craving. I know there's something inside of me, but it's been masked by fear and anxiety. But no more, I'ma break out of the chains. Let's defiantly go! I'm waking up, this ain't enough. All of my dreams were starting to rust, but I believe that I can adjust. Positive thoughts, I'm starting to trust. Nothing's deserved unless you work. Something of worth requires an urge. I have been hurt by those at their worst, but that gave me will, some power, a surge. And they know that I won't surrender, so they fear me as a contender. When I fight, they always remember, yeah. I will be known, I won't let go. I will not stop, I will be great. I will be known, I won't let go. I will not stop, I will be great. am a hunter, I've been filled with demons and hunger. I am the thunder, I command the masses in numbers. Look at the fear in their eyes, this is what happens when you are surprised. It's time to meet your demise, just call me Zeus and look to the sky. Everything's amplified, no they cannot deny, I will be rectified. If you dissect me, find scars, teach you left behind, injuries that define me to my core. They'll hear me roar like never before, the pain I absorbed, it's feeding my core. I'm hard to ignore, I'll beat down your door. If you wanted war, well then you got war.
And they know that I won't surrender, so they fear me as a contender. When I fight they always remember, yeah. I will be known